everyone. We'll call tonight's regular meeting of the Eau Claire Area School Board to order. Terry, if you could confirm that we are in compliance with open meeting laws.
Yes, we are.
Thank you. And if you could please call roll.
Commissioner Bika?
Here.
Commissioner Clements?
Here.
Commissioner Farrar?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Lyons?
Here.
Commissioner Nordine?
Here.
Commissioner Zer?
We'll now move on to our Pledge of Allegiance. This week's pledge leader is Peyton Sachs. And Principal Keaton from Manz writes, Peyton is a fifth grader at Manz. However, she is so much more than that. She's an active member of our community, participating in Girl Scouts, and is an avid basketball player. Peyton has attended Manz for her entire elementary school career, and although she is sad to be leaving us this June, she is excited and ready for new challenges and adventures at South. And Principal Kolop is in the back if you want to hit him up before you go. He can answer all your questions. Peyton is a kind friend, positive problem solver, and always has a great story to share. Peyton is a wonderful example of someone who embodies what a man's Mustang is at school and in our community. Peyton, thank you for being here today. Those of you who are willing and able, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we will move to the adoption of tonight's agenda. I would hear a motion to adopt the agenda for the evening.
Second.
All those in favor of the adoption of tonight's agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The agenda is adopted. We'll start, as always, with our recognitions, and for that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Johnson.
Good evening, Chair Nordine, board members, student representatives, and distinguished guests this evening. First off, National Special Education Day. December 2nd marked National Special Education Day, and on the anniversary of the nation's first special education law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act in 1972, we pause to celebrate the accomplishments of our students, parents, teachers, and administrators when it comes to special education. IDEA helped make education accessible to all children in the United States. We celebrate the progress that has been made and reaffirm our commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Regarding special education for our district, ECASD began the 2022-23 school year serving approximately 1,904 students who have individualized educational programs. We employ 118 special education teachers, 33 speech and language pathologists, and 11 occupational and physical therapists, along with many other staff who support students receiving special education services. ECASD has a parent-teacher organization to support special education student families. In 2017-18, the district received a 91.57% composite approval rating in a survey conducted of parents with a child receiving special education services. Our results exceeded the state average of 89.4% and DPI's target of or at or above 89%. This survey will be repeated in the 2023-24 school year. Secondly, we have the Manz School Sense program. This school year, Manz joined up with Royal Credit Union to be the 30th school site to participate in the RCU School Sense program in the Chippewa Valley. Coincidentally, this also happens to be the 30th anniversary of RCU's School Sense program, which began during the 1992-93 school year. This is a wonderful partnership that has helped to positively impact the lives of thousands of students and improve their financial literacy over the years. In recognition of this 30 for 30, Manz will be hosting a small celebration and ribbon cutting ceremony with our partners from RCU on December 16th. Tonight, Adam Keaton, Manz principal, is here to accept this recognition. So, Mr. Keaton, if you'll join me up front. Through here.
Two.
Now move on to our public forum for the evening. The board provides up to 30 minutes in which to address the board. For speakers, each speaker will be allowed up to 4 minutes. I will cut you off at that 4 minutes. My apologies in advance if I do so. The school board will not hear personal complaints of school personnel nor any person connected with the school system in a public forum. As always, I apologize if I mispronounce your name from the sheet here. We'll start tonight, and if you'd please come up to the desk there, we'll start tonight with Ka Vu.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ka Vu. I am a program director for the Black and Brown Women Power Coalition, and you heard from me last week. This afternoon, we received an email about the reversal of the decision to remove Japanese and Hmong as world language courses. I am grateful to hear of this decision. The gratitude I feel is towards the community who came together and the board members who I know advocated for and with us. As I heard many board members say last week, there is deep discomfort, heartache, and emotion that you all felt from the community as we brought forth our concerns. I believe that this is a lesson for all of us as leaders within our own communities and representatives for our constituents. That prior to decisions being made, we must engage with the communities that are disproportionately impacted by our decisions. This is a point of growth, and I hope that we can all move forward in this community together, that you see this one decision as not an issue that is over and done with, but a decision that has made you reevaluate who you are as a board member and what you uphold. Reflection and reevaluation do not happen in a nutshell. I believe it happens through accountability. This is the ability to identify where we have made mistakes or done harm and move forward with making more transparent, open, and equitable decisions. Oftentimes, we are scared of being held accountable. There's shame around making mistakes, but through accountability, we can learn to do better. Accountability and critique are unique in community building and should not be seen as terrifying as we make it out to seem. It means that we expect better out of you and one another. Accountability is an act of radical love for ourselves and our community. It is a gift to be called out. It means people see and want us to see our ability to change. When we are no longer held accountable for our actions, it means we are no longer safe people. The initial decision that was made about the Japanese and Hmong language courses pushed the community to come together to hold you accountable. It was a decision made without transparency and sensitivity to the community impacted. We will all continue to hold you all accountable through and through and hope that you all continue to listen and make the decisions that allow our community to thrive. Thank you.
Next speaker is Kasaya Kiso.
Hi, I am Kasai Kizer. I am the BIPOC Outreach Coordinator for Black and Brown Women Power Coalition, and I am the co-founder of Cultivative Coalition. I am here to continue the conversation on the Hmong and Japanese language classes. While we appreciate and are grateful that the board and the school district decided to reevaluate their decision and ultimately keep all of the languages, I am adamant that we do not ignore the missteps that were taken to get to this point. While some may think the only issue was the cutting or consolidating of the language courses, other issues like the lack of communication and complete disregard for how students, parents, and specifically the BIPOC communities in Eau Claire would feel about this decision are prevalent. The overarching problem, which is not just subject to the Eau Claire School District, of using EDI and EDI policies to make school district look better is most damaging. This was shown through decision processes for the language classes by not following protocol outlined in your equity commitment policies, such as OE2, which states that the superintendent will invite, encourage, and amplify the voices of historically marginalized communities in decision-making. This was clearly not done. Equity statements and EDI policies mean nothing if they're not going to be followed through with. And while in the past, school districts were praised for even implementing these policies and statements, this will no longer be the case. The time of uplifting, empowerment, growth, and accountability is upon all of us. These are the principles that should be instilled in every young person that goes through the school district. Every community member, and every person who comes into contact with these students. It is especially necessary for those who make the decision. I say all this to say that simply reinstating the classes is not enough. This decision has caused mistrust between the community and stakeholders, including the students and the district. It's also caused hurt. Now we are expected to be able to move forward and trust that this will not happen again. The only way that we will be able to do this is with accountability. Hold yourselves accountable for the missteps that were taken. Hold yourselves accountable for the lack of transparency. Hold yourselves accountable for implementing EDI policies and not following through with them. Empty words and empty promises will no longer be accepted, and neither will the bare minimum. Following through is among one of the universals that we teach children. They're told once you've committed to something, you have to follow through. This advice goes for all of you as well. You've committed to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Accountability is another thing we teach children. If they make a mistake, it's best to own it and do their best to apologize. We expect nothing less of all of you. To simply reinstate the classes is not enough. Ask one another how you will avoid this issue in the future, as well as how you came to make this mistake in the past. Come up with realistic solutions, and if you can't trust yourselves to hold each other accountable, share those solutions with the community, and we will. Thank you.
Next speaker is Mark Goings.
Thank you. Coherent governance is supposed to help the board focus on results, staying at the 20,000 foot level. One practical concern I've always had about coherent governance is what if we begin down a road that seems contrary to the mission and goals of the district? At what point does the board get involved? I understand that the board can ultimately hold the superintendent responsible. However, there also needs to be something possible before that. As was mentioned last week, you are all elected officials. You are all accountable to the people of Eau Claire. There are times that I hope the board will take a more hands-on approach to governance. Such involvement should be rare, but when it is done, it needs to be in a manner conducive to effective decision-making. Last week, the coherent governance model failed the board and district administration. Let me be clear, I believe it is appropriate for the board to weigh in on operational topics like world languages. However, what happened last week was not the discussion we needed. Since world languages was not an agenda item, no context into how or why the decision was made was shared. The board may have had this background, but there is a reason that we hold meetings publicly, and part of that reason is to provide the public with context. If you continue with this governance model, may I offer one suggestion? Create a method allowing the board to weigh in directly on an operational issue. This should not be the norm. However, should it become apparent that the board would like to formally weigh in on an operational topic, someone should call the question, conduct a roll call vote, and to ensure that such involvement is rare, I'd suggest it be a vote of 6 out of 7 board members to reach the threshold for the discussion. Should the motion pass, the topic is automatically on the agenda for the next school board meeting as an item for a discussion. In agenda setting, you could even decide if elements should be addressed in closed session or if it'd be best in open session. As a case study, very early in the board's discussion last week, it became evident that the board had concerns about an operational decision. At that point, a vote should have been taken and then the discussion tabled until the following meeting. During the following meeting, the administration could have provided further background if necessary, and then a more comprehensive discussion could have taken place. Growth within our educational system is a complex task. Each of us has a vital role to play, and we must all strive to do better. Thank you.
That concludes our public forum for this evening. We'll now move on to our regular reports, and we'll start as always with the Referendum Committee. Commissioner Lyons.
The Referendum Committee did meet on Thursday, December 1st. We did give advice and input on tonight's board action item, which is the resolution authorizing the issuance and the sale of $98 million of bond issuance. And I believe Director Johnson will have a report when that item comes up. End of report.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our legislative liaison, Dr. Johnson.
Registration for the 2023 Wisconsin State Education Convention is now open. The annual conference will take place January 18th through the 20th in Milwaukee at the Wisconsin Center. Any school board members wishing to attend should let Terry know by December 15th, as that is the deadline for early bird registration. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to tonight's consent agendas. For each of our consent agendas, the board acts with one vote without discussion. Items on the consent agendas have been discussed at previous meetings, or the board has been provided background material. If any member wishes to discuss an item, it can be pulled from the consent agenda and voted on separately. Tonight's superintendent's consent agenda includes only the human resources employment report. And at this time, I would hear a motion to approve the superintendent's consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of the approval of the superintendent's consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. And opposed. You will now move on to the board's consent agenda. The board's consent agenda includes minutes of closed session, November 28th, 2022, and minutes of board meeting, November 28th, 2022. I would hear a motion to approve the board's consent agenda. All those in favor of approval of the board's consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed. Consent agendas are approved. We'll now move on to one of our two segments of matters reserved for board action. This is a discussion of policy and procedures related to the world languages decision. After last week's meeting and requests to be on the agenda, we did in fact speak about it in agenda setting. Dr. Farrar was our third member. I did look back through the policy. We do have a very open way to, like, policy for getting on the agenda. I know that was a question for last time. It's GC 2 4 D 2. So it's way down there, but individual members may submit requests for agenda items to the board president prior to the agenda setting meeting. So in the future, if there's an interest in a board agenda item, please let the president at that time know, and the agenda setting group will take it up and hopefully find a way to put it on the agenda. In any event, tonight we have an agenda item to discuss policy and procedures related to world languages. We kept it very broad in our agenda setting item, not knowing what the status of the individual decision would be. Since, of course, the decision has been reversed, the board no longer needs to rule on whether or not the decision itself was reasonable. And so we will move on to sort of two topics of discussion. And some of our public commenters talked about accountability, and this is a chance for the board to look at our performance in two ways. One, at the process and procedures, how the board can support the administration and ensure that our expectations, our operational expectations and our results policies are clear, and we are able to express our values clearly. That may involve some discussion of potentially needing to change policies or understand interpretations better. As we start, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Johnson first. The second way that we, are able to monitor and hold ourselves accountable is our own performance. We found ourselves in a situation that was different than those that we had faced before in this model. And, we'll have a chance to talk about ways that we can do better as a board to make sure that our procedures are clear. Dr. Farrar brought up in agenda setting perhaps some more discussion of what is meant by our board policies that are reasonable would be an effective topic, and we'll open it up from there. So after Superintendent Johnson, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Farrar, and from there we'll open it up to be recognized and have a discussion. Also discussed in agenda setting was that given in the event of something like this where we did not have to weigh on whether or not the course catalog would be affected or whether or not the languages would continue for the upcoming year, it removes some of the immediacy of our discussion. And so we're going to cap this session at 30 minutes, but we already have potentially planned for more discussion at the next meeting, and we can continue to follow on. So we will be able to fully explore the issue, but because we have other agenda items, agenda setting group agreed that we could cap this at 30 minutes for tonight and continue on as need be as we work through it. So that being said, it is 8:20, so we'll go until 8:50. Sorry, 7:20 to 7:50. Thank you for those of you that noticed that right away. So this time I'll turn it over to you. Superintendent Johnson will follow up with Dr. Farrar, and then we'll open it for discussion between board members and student representatives and the superintendent.
No, thank you. And thanks to the folks who had spoken this evening. Some of this I would address with what I'll share with the board, what I'd prepared a little bit before, as well as I do appreciate, and I took the comments very seriously from the public comment last week as well. Although we had the announcement go out this afternoon, I do want to make sure that this is in public session, very much like I shared with our language teachers today, our stakeholders, parents in the district, secondary parents, and the press release. But after receiving considerable feedback in recent weeks from community members, families, students, board members, and other stakeholders, district administration has changed the operational decision on world language, and this operational change was also determined after significant collaboration between district and school administration. The two highlighted points were that we will continue to offer 6 language options at the high school level, and we will not narrow language options to 4 starting in 23-24 as previously stated. The second piece is Hmong and Japanese will not be discontinued. Now, we did have some dialogue, very little, because timeliness, as well as we knew that there was going to be a board meeting tonight. We knew that this was going to have half an hour worth of discussion. I don't want to get out in front of things too much, but there were a couple questions I was able to answer. But ultimately, the administrative team will seek alternative solutions to the challenges identified as part of staffing, low enrollment, or sustainability of world language classes. I do want to share that there were pieces in the executive summary about the strength of the programming. And I think there were a couple speakers last week who that was never implied that the 2 teachers in question with those 2 programs were not outstanding people and outstanding teachers. That was probably a result of, when it comes to sustainability, if these people were to leave and to go elsewhere, it's very difficult. That's that sustainability piece. And we've heard from our community that when there are world languages, they like them to be face-to-face. And quite honestly, it's very, very difficult to do so. And, 3 of you work at the university level, and you may know Carmen Manning. Carmen and I are have become very close in the past 2.5 years. And I'm always asking her, okay, this semester, how many world language folks do you have? But that goes to the sustainability, and it's that strength of the program. And it's not with the 2 people, Jackson and Hiroko, that are leading the Hmong and the Japanese languages. We've had a lot of time to reflect and alter the decision. And the one area I take full responsibility for, and you should not, and I think at times people may not know about the accountability piece. This is not your decision. This was mine. And I have shared that with others that I take full responsibility for any missteps. This is not you. And bringing others to the table before a decision was determined, not after the fact, not here's what we thought and here's what we're going to do moving forward. Please help us. And because we need to address the challenges and we need to address them differently for not just those 2 languages, but for, let's say, any elective class that comes forth with any review process. My inability to utilize the director of EDI appropriately, the Hmong PTA and partners in the community like the university, they're all great examples of this. The board and others last week had questioned its own coherent governance model, and it should not have had to do so. That model shouldn't be questioned, nor you should as board members, when ultimately I had not followed and adhered to that policy of gaining the stakeholder input. When procedures aren't followed, we know that from a superintendent lens, as well as a principal lens, a director lens. Policy decisions can be confusing, they can be questionable, and at times harm others. And I have to repair the harm. I'm responsible. We anticipate connecting far more deeply with the impacted staff in the next few days and few weeks. And other groups individually too, to address the challenges. They are different for all our world language programs, of which we have 6. I look forward to that opportunity. Other stakeholder groups have reached out since the afternoon's announcement, and they said, we appreciate that. We look forward to that dialogue. And I do. I truly appreciate it and respect it deeply. It's an important discussion that we're going to have for the half hour we have today, as well as on the 19th, whatever the board feels is necessary, because we do have many decisions to make administratively and operationally in the future. There are times where it may be a board decision, but you probably gain an administrative recommendation, and we need to continue to follow that. An example I just wanted to give was in previous board meetings, we've talked about increments. Now, while that may be a board decision, because it comes down to compensation, there would be an administrative recommendation. And we need to ensure that the policies are followed, the appropriate stakeholders are contacted well in advance. People want to be part of that because likely not all stakeholders would be supportive of a future recommendation. There may be winners, there may be some losers. You just never know. And that's why this dialogue this evening, as well as 2 weeks from now, is really important to make us stronger as a board, as an administrative team, as a community, as a district. So that's just what I wanted to share tonight to open up. I hope that's okay. And just wanted to go back to the agenda item and transition back to the board.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to Dr. Farrar.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. Last week, we were challenged about this coherent governance model because the board in this model can only intervene and override an administrative decision should we deem it collectively and vote that it is unreasonable. A majority of the board would need to vote a decision unreasonable. And a discussion ensued among us about what that would mean to deem something unreasonable, and concerns arose about seeing unreasonable as a slippery slope kind of a term, or a term that could cease to have any meaning, and that anyone could decide that they didn't like a decision and deem it unreasonable, and that could erode the separation of powers between the school administration and their ability to have control over operational decision-making and the board. One thing that occurred to me in that conversation, and this took place during our agenda setting meeting, was that it was clear to me that numerous policies had been violated in this particular decision that has now been reversed. And I'm very grateful that this decision has been reversed. It occurred to me that one way that we might, as a body, decide to move forward with potentially codifying what it is we mean by unreasonable would be to require that we tied an unreasonable designation to policy violations, and to be able to say this particular policy has been violated and that is why it is unreasonable. That would separate the notion of unreasonable from individual attitudes or individual value judgments, and it would locate it back within our policy language. What we might have to do subsequently is look at our policies and investigate if we believe they are specific enough so that we would be able to identify specific policy violations to tie to an unreasonable decision in the future. These are ideas that are on the table. I think that those are potential options. As I said in the agenda setting meeting, in which I would like to repeat for the public, is that I see two real values to the coherent governance model, which is that
I do believe that professional educators should be the ones making decisions about education and not members of the public who are elected who may have no expertise in education and could potentially even be hostile to the existence of public education. For that reason, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to invest those decisions within the body of professional educators. But as we saw here, there was a decision where we felt our values were not aligned with that outcome. And in my reading of our policies, the decision was not consistent with either our equity statement and commitment or the way that equity is woven into numerous policies, especially those in the operational expectations category, but is also in the results category. I think I'd like to pause here and invite other conversation and feedback from other board members.
Commissioner Nazar, and again, it's just, feel free to light up your thing and I'll put you on a list to be recognized as you do. But Commissioner Nazar.
This is just more a point of order, and then I can speak later. But considering that Superintendent Johnson finished his portion, I'm wondering if we could have 30 minutes from that.
Sure. I mean, we're right on.
So
we start now. We're right on schedule.
Could we end at 8 o'clock?
We will go to 8 o'clock. I don't think that's a problem, unless anybody really objects. That's fine. We're
not to say that you were long-winded or anything, Superintendent Johnson, but I just want to make sure we keep our time. I can go though if no one else is ready.
Please.
Thank you, Commissioner Farrar. That was something that is something I believe is worth us considering is do we want to codify some sort of qualification for what we see as unreasonable? I think that's a reason for us to be talking about. Before we sort of monitor ourselves, the one thing I want to speak to, and I think this became clear to me following last week's conversation and just some further thinking about it and the strength of our policies. I believe the fact that members of the public can stand up in front of this body and quote our policy to us is evidence enough that it was strong enough. And it spoke to the community in such a way that they were able to say, they were able to check us. And I think that is important. And I think that, had those public comment, if public comment was more of a two-way dialogue, I think we could have said, I think that would have been part of that conversation. I actually find a lot of strength in our policy, and I think it really speaks for itself. I think, Superintendent Johnson, to your points about the procedural pieces and the question of do we need to codify procedure, and I think that is the slippery slope. And I think that procedures need to be nimble. They need to be able to change depending on the circumstances, depending on the community that is being talked to or being decided, in consideration of. I do think that needs to remain nimble. That said, I want to take this opportunity just to share that I really found 4 things that and I'll just say them quickly. We have a wonderful director of EDI in our district, and the way that equity is woven into our policy, I would hope that Director Yang is woven into every single decision that this district is making as the checkpoint to those policies, so that work is maintained through that directorship. Number 2, that the community, when we say involve the community, I think that, and then again, this is the first time we've rumbled in this arena, so it's natural that we're going to have these misinterpretations or things are going to go not the right way. But I am perhaps on this body the most passionate about how we get the community, and particularly those that don't have a voice at this table, involved in the things that really matter. And believe it or not, it's not so much sitting here, it's the things that affect day-to-day lives of students and families in our district. And I want that to be taken seriously. And again, do we need to strengthen that? Does that need to be codified? I don't think so. The third thing, and I mentioned this in a conversation with Commissioner Bika, there's one line in our student success policy related to innovation. And that has no definition for us. And I think that what we see in Japanese and Hmong in particular are innovative programs. We're the only school district in the state of Wisconsin that offers those languages. I believe that's true. I could be speaking incorrectly there, but I believe that that is a statement that we should wear as a badge of pride on our chest. And when we have an innovative program, what does that mean? And what does equity mean when it's an innovative program? And we don't have definition there. And we don't have a system by which we support innovative programs in a meaningful way. And we used to, we tried with LEAP and it was not a thing that should have been, but the systems around innovation, and I would challenge us to say, is that language strong enough? Does it need definition? Do we need to put things under there? Do we need to list it? Would that be of use to the administration? I don't know. Or can the administration sort that out on their own? But when we look to our innovative programs, that has to have, that bar is different. And different considerations have to be made for those programs. And to this is perhaps to what Mr. Going spoke about a little bit, is number 4, is how do we have a process by which the administration asks us, like, hey, we think we're doing the right thing by your policy. We think we're going in the right direction. We've done these things. What do you think? Can we continue with this? There's actually no checkpoint. And so what we end up running into is just this boom, no. And there's actually there's not a presentation and then an opportunity for us to say, have you thought about, did you think about, tell us more about this. And if that does happen, that happens through email chains where we all give our feedback, or we say things randomly. It's not in public, and it's personal. It's just from me to Mike or you to Mike or whatever, but it's not done in a public way where the community can weigh in before a decision is made. Is this the arena that needs to happen when there's a delicate situation that might really thread the needle of what our policy says? And I don't know. Should we have a process by which they ask? And the only other thing about the GC, 452B, what is it? The one you said? I just lost it. I have it up here, but I can't find it now.
In GC2.
GC2 4B2,
Sure.
that one. I think that could be strengthened to a majority vote of the board, put something on the agenda. I think that the agenda setting is a minority of this body. And depending on the makeup of that agenda setting, any number of things could happen. And there's really no, I could ask you, Tim, but you could just say, no. There's really actually no motive for you to put it on an agenda other than I've asked you to. And so I'm from just a strengthening point of view, is that something for us to consider, that we actually take a vote to put something on an agenda instead of just me asking kindly? Is that something we want to have a majority vote on? So that's kind of my spiel.
Commissioner Lyons.
The languages issue impacted my family personally. And it goes all the way back to the spring, and it was around German. And it was connected to the sustainability of that program because they were losing a faculty member. And in addition to that, the German numbers are dropping. They're low. When we came back in the fall, the sustainability of that program was even further hindered because the ability to hire a German teacher was fruitless. And so that program then went online, and my son didn't want to take it online. So my perspective on the languages, and I'm a very strong proponent of keeping all these languages, but there's a caveat in this. These language programs need to be sustainable. They need to have enrollments, and they need to be financially conducive to all of the other programs that we have. Now, are languages more important than other programs? I believe they are. I believe that they are more important because they are important in who we are as a community, but also important for being able to go out into the larger world. Now, I'm saying all of this because I don't know what reasonable is, and I don't know what unreasonable is. I think reasonable and unreasonable is getting feedback from the community and the board's discussion of what that is. Was it reasonable to take a look at these programs given some of the enrollments? Yeah, it was. And the sustainability of these programs needs to be a consideration. And we need a partnership from the community to build these programs up to make them the best that they can be. And right now, they do have issues. Now we're going to keep them, but let's not pretend that the task now is done. I don't think it's done. I think that what is a benefit that has come out of this is a focus on these programs as being really important to this community, to this board, to the educational process. And we need to really make this a jewel of the Eau Claire Area School District. And so I commend your decision, Superintendent Johnson, to not eliminate these programs. And I think that there is a great thing that we can do in moving them forward and making it stronger. I'm not entirely certain that policy is going to cover all of the aspects, because when you're running a school district and when we're dealing with these kind of problems, they're so complex. The complexities of EDI, the complexities of student outcomes, the complexities of financial, which are all based in our policies as well, they intersect one another. And so I don't know the answer on how to codify a policy because they're just very complex problems that at the end of the day, this governing body may have worked, right? It may have worked because there was consideration on what to do with the language programs. The community spoke, the board heard. And at the end of the day, I think that the right decisions are being made. I'll yield.
I have one other thing that I did not say, and since I'm hoping the rest of you will speak, but I just wanted to say that to your point, one other thing that I think this body needs to keep in mind when we run into things like this, and perhaps this speaks to the mechanism about how we get to check in, how we get to, if there's something that's tender or feels like it's going to be in violation of the spirit of the policy, you know, the thing that I worry about is where we need to be able to discuss or have as a body a greater vision. You know, we just did a referendum, which was visionary work, right? We're asking the administration to give us a plan for referenda out into the future because we want to be visionary and lead this school district into the future in a way that is well funded. And I think what we heard last week was an hour and a half, some change anyway, of students and families and community members. They didn't come up to criticize our schools. They came up to express their sincere love and gratitude for the opportunities that they had within the walls of our buildings. And it is those opportunities that speak to our community. So how can we weave as a board? We are the people responsible for funding via referendum, really at the end of the day. And this is a funding mechanism, a funding decision, a funding thing where we can say, oh yeah, if we're having a hard time with foreign language enrollments and we need to put some oomph behind these programs, whether it's marketing or additional staff or something in the bill, something. That is something we put as a word and put some money behind it, and we ask our community to support us. And if they say no, then that's on them. But if we value it and we hear their value in it, you know, who's to say that we can't create an operational referendum that doesn't have fine art and foreign language as a line item in there? And instead of cutting programs and getting rid of music opportunities and getting rid of foreign language opportunities and getting rid of all of these comprehensive things, the challenges of a comprehensive high school, let's decide that we're going to do it as a district. We're going to commit to it, and let's ask our community to stand behind us. And if that, I mean, I don't know how we do that if we don't hear, and you know what I mean? Like there seems to be that barrier for us. And so that's just another consideration that I took out of this, another point that I left with.
Commissioner Clements.
Thank you. So my comments are more, at least presently, on what do we do with where we're at, right? I think that there's other avenues of introspection which we should pursue in terms of how is the decision made so that we can try to avoid arriving at a similar point. There were commissioners there talked about, you know, how do we have some sort of engagement with the board on things which we've decided are operational and have delegated, but we still want to make sure that we're scrupulously ensuring that policies and procedures are followed every single time there's a decision. I think that goes to a couple of other commissioners' concerns about this governance model, is that it requires a great deal of trust because we don't see those decisions that otherwise are expressions of those policies, and how do we make sure that they're being followed faithfully. I think the governance model is a good one, but it's imperfect. I don't think there's such a thing as a perfect governance model. And ours is new. I think the shine's still there, although, you know, has been dented a bit in the past few weeks. But the fact that we don't have something built in to the earlier points about there's not a place we can point to and say, look, there's this thing that we learned about, could be anything that's been brought to our attention, which we don't think is reasonable, or at the very least we want to look into further. It's not exactly clear how we do that. I think that was something that we overlooked in the construction of this, in part because we were more or less cobbling it together from what the greatest hits of other communities, right? And we were really careful on how we ensured that equity inclusion was included at every single place, you know, every single policy. And we were at our creative tension with, we also wanted to be concise and have flexibility. And that meant cutting some things that we felt we weren't really sure what this is about and whether we needed it. And I'm not suggesting that one of those things was left on the cutting room floor, but clearly that was one thing that was missed. And I have little doubt that there will be some other thing that we find imperfect with the way that it's written. But I think we do need to have that. We didn't notice, you know, that issue on the meeting last week, so we couldn't have made a decision on it. which is why we're here. But I think there also still needs to be a way that it's done in such a way that we're not looking over batches of operational decisions every couple of months because the administration is looking over their shoulder like, I'm not sure what we're doing here. That's exactly the opposite of a high-performing governance body of any kind. Believe me, I go to over a dozen governance meetings a month in my current job, and most of them are looking over the staff shoulder on almost everything, and it's not a good way to function. So I'm confident we'll get there. I don't quite know what that means. I don't know if I've seen an example of what exactly that looks like, how we can try to thread that needle. But I think there's a landing zone that we can hit, and will be an improvement for where we're at. I don't think that will prevent similar situations from happening in the future where we're calling into question something, but at least will provide us a way to react more clearly. I think how we got here is, again, is a matter of a different conversation, but just trying to figure out how do we make this governance model work better that achieves the outcomes that we have very clearly written into it, and that our community members, reminded us in the district of. Thank you.
Dr. Farrar? Oh, sorry, Dr. Johnson, you haven't had a chance yet.
As we consider moving forward, I think there's two pieces as it pertains to this adopted model, and one of those pieces really speaks to "quote unquote" the efficiency of conducting a meeting. That's one component of the model, and the other is the construction of policies that lay out how a district is supposed to function. And unless there is a piece, and I'm not sure, Commissioner Clemens, if that's what he was getting at. For me, a weakness or area of improvement of this particular model, because Commissioner Clemens seems to be a little bit more optimistic than I am, that if this were an issue were to arise again, an issue will arise again. The inability to be reactive in real time and minimize and or eliminate a combativeness of a community, to say that something doesn't matter, when I think a lot of us were sitting in this meeting 2 weeks ago. This matters. People that knock on your door, it matters. But I'm just not sure as a board member, you should not be frozen in your ability to address things that actually matter to the community. And it's somewhat absent in the current model that we have. And the only way it's not absence that someone amongst the seven of us are psychic. Maybe some of you have that talent. I do not. But it's being as proactive as possible to see all the moving pieces. The other piece that I've always been critical about is that whole idea of, I'm just not sure trust works in like a business, in a business, in an education, in an educational sense. We all hope in what we do that it's the best intended outcomes. We were hoping that the decision that the administrative team made about world languages was in the best interest of like student outcome. That wasn't the case. So it's one of those things where as people continue to consider, maybe do more research. Maybe there's like a hybrid coherent model. especially about the efficiencies of actually running a meeting, setting out guidelines for administrators to follow, but also the avenue for actually school boards when needed. And maybe it may be by majority vote, having to intervene in a timely manner, because as our school board president pointed out in policy 24B2, Commissioner Reserve pointed out, actually the school board president, whoever's in that particular position, could actually say, no, we're not going to put that on the agenda. And it would have actually been unacceptable. It would have been unacceptable if this issue was not put on the agenda. Unacceptable. That has to be addressed. So, thank you.
Representative Lester. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, then I guess coming back to that, Dr. Farrar, you,
That's okay.
how about Commissioner Clements? Will someone down that way? My apologies.
So I referred to my comments to that I think the healthy skepticism we have to have about this governance model, we need to be vigilant about it. I think that the matter of getting something on the agenda is something we should pursue. Is not something I'd mentioned previously, Commissioner Johnson. In fact, we couldn't have taken action last meeting because it wasn't on the agenda. So that's irrespective of the governance model. We can only take action on something that's noticed. So, I don't think that there was a problem with that. What I suggested is we need to have a way where we clearly have a way to act when we need to. And regardless of the governance model, we're by necessity going to be somewhat reactive to a problem comes up, we need to address it. We've, I think, been clear as to what our objectives are based on what we've said in our policies. I'm questioning how we got to that, arrived at that decision, given what the various governance policies are. Again, I think that's a different question, but I don't see that responsiveness as necessarily the problem in this case. Like, we couldn't have acted before. Let's figure out a way to make sure that we really can. And if that means that there's a item that is on our board agenda somewhat regularly that is a placeholder for looking at things that are either coming up or things that the administration is studying and they want to have a workshop session on, or we feel like we need to peel back the onion on a decision because we're not quite clear if it was consistent, then I think we should absolutely do that. And I don't think that's in any way antithetical to what Commissioner Johnson or other board members have suggested. And at the same time, I think it is consistent with what we've said we want to do as a board. I don't think anyone here suggested we need to have short meetings at any expense and its efficiency over everything. I refer to a high-performing board. That doesn't mean having short meetings. That means we should be effective in driving outcomes.
Sure.
I would just say that I think that as the district takes steps to repair the broken trust with community members, the board must do the same as well. It doesn't matter that we didn't make this decision because we're responsible for it anyway. And that's what we're elected for. And that's the bottom line. And I think that all of us need to be prepared to participate in that reparative work. And I know that I am. And that means that we have to do what we say we're going to do. It means that when we talk about equity, the people in the room need to know what it means. And that, as many people pointed out at the last meeting, that words don't mean anything if they aren't backed up by actions. And this was a failure of process and of policy. We've taken a step forward in the reversal of this decision, but I want the public to know, and I want those in this room to know, and those who are online, and those who are just in this community to know that the board understands that reparative work has got to happen, and that communication with affected groups has got to happen in a two-way manner, and that it is not, you should not have to come to us in public comment hurting. And so I want to apologize to the community and to pledge my commitment to repairing this harm.
Representative Lester will give you the last, well, I'll maybe let Dr. B have a last shot if there's anything that you need, but go ahead and we'll move on.
I just wanted to add in regards to like promoting these programs now, I think a part of the answer is to come from the students. And I say that because we all saw how many students were present at the last meeting and how passionate they were when talking about the programs that they're a part of. And also afterwards, I had plenty of students come up to me at school in my classes talking about how can we fix this? What can we do? Like, what are you doing on the board? Like, I can see that you're there. Like, how can we work together? And I think that by seeing how passionate students are when fighting to keep their programs, just think about how much more passionate they'll be when they're discussing how other students can be a part of it, not fighting for it to be available to students in the first place. So I think that moving forward, when making decisions like this, students should be considered and that they can help promote this or other elective programs in general, rather than just having to fight for them to stay. They can be the ones reaching out to have more students take their classes in the first place.
Thank you. I have jotted down, I think, about at least 4 different, policy areas that different commissioners brought up for consideration. So maybe that we can dig more into some of those suggestions. Ones that I have down from Dr. Farrar, that question about, do we need to do some defining on what is reasonable and should it relate to that? Do we need to define innovation more fully in OE5 from Commissioner Zur, as well as I think both Commissioner Zur and Dr. Johnson mentioned potentially considering, how requests for agenda items get added. I think that can be a discussion. And then Dr. Johnson brought up just a generalized, consideration of sort of, I don't know if it's ready for a rec policy discussion, but a hybridization or looking for ways to be more responsive to issues. But maybe that could be the focus of our the third session next time. I don't necessarily, again, I'm not anticipating that we necessarily will complete everything in these little chunks, but we have this time to do the board development work, and we'll discuss it more at agenda setting tomorrow. Thank you to my colleagues for all of the discussion tonight. So then at this time, we'll move to our next segment, which is monitoring district results. Tonight, we have on the docket OE6 personnel administration. I will turn it over to Superintendent Johnson and then be able to discuss the most recent monitoring report.
Thank you. Terry, I'll just kind of go narrative here. I don't think you need to worry too much about.
Just let me know.
Yeah, I will. I think what I do in my remarks, I kind of talk about 6.1, 6.2, but I wanted to add a little bit more data from last year to this year, and we appreciated the comment last year. First of all, for the monitoring period, increase in district compliance of additional 3 of the 15 policies over the past year. Secondly, looking at all the indicators, counting up 35 last year and 33 this year. That'd be a real interesting item, but it was to me drilling a little more deeply. We increased our compliance on indicators from 71 to 77% for full compliance. We dropped our non-compliance from 17% to 3%. So proud of that work that we've done, and a couple of the indicators you'll see in the document, or you have seen in the document. So I'd like to talk about 6.1 very briefly, creating and maintaining the organizational culture that demonstrates our values. In compliance with exception, while we did add an additional indicator, we're not compliant with the amount of data collection or the levels to maintain and improve a positive culture. We went down in our goal of 50% of our staff to take that survey. Our plan to achieve it, like we talk about when something is not compliant, what are we going to do about it? Monitor this in mid-May 2023 when that survey is shared. Then we look to disaggregate by each school, alert the principal if the school is under 50% participation, remind staff again in a separate district or superintendent update, and if necessary, prompt the principals at that last staff meeting. It's not ideal, but at least it's, before everyone leaves with 15 minutes left in the day, because that's important for us. We've experienced the same types of frustration with maybe, not hearing from some of our staff during in-service week, because we want that input to then improve what we can deliver for the PLIP days, those types of things. And we realize people are busy. But I think with a little bit more adherence to that and then sharing that with principals, for example, the last principal meeting we had before the PLIP day, was just a remembrance. Could you please share that with staff? And I know that the participation went up to get that feedback. So anyway, it's going to help gain a clearer picture and more data for our district staff to then support our principals, which in turn supports the rest of our staff to promote that positive culture. For 6.2, continue to be compliant with some exceptions noted. We're really pleased with indicator 4. The increase of candidate and staff diversity increasing to closely reflect the student population. We're not going to get to 25% yet, but it's kind of nice to go from 5 to 8 like we have up there. I'm sorry, from 5 to almost 9. So that's kind of nice to see from 21 to 22. For 6.3, we've improved our compliance in 6.3 to the development of the departmental succession planning. That's done. We've improved our compliance in 6.4 with effectively handling employee complaints. It looks a little bit different than last year because we didn't want to call out just 1 or 2 or 3 instances where, with that limited data, somebody might say, oh yeah, by the way, it was that person. On talking with Kay in her department, that was important for us. We did not want to have someone, violate that confidentiality just because of addressing 1 or 2 or 3 things. We've maintained our compliance with 6.5 and 6.6 with our system of maintenance of comprehensive job descriptions and the confidential information on personnel matters. Again, 6.6 and 6.4 are similar, where we did not want to say, well, we had 1 or we had 2 or we had 3 incidents of confidential information being violated. While we've improved our compliance in 6.7 for development of attractive compensation plans to attract and retain employees, in 6.8 for evaluation in accordance with DPI regulations, 6.9 for PD and training for all employees. We adjusted and added an indicator for improved compliance for 10. That would be communication of pertinent and critical district information in a more opportune fashion. We added in red, I believe, Gary, for 10, timely and. You can just have a consistent system, but it's got to be timely. And I wanted to put this up there with the weekly district update. I put it as an asterisk. This goes directly to an insurance and benefit communication from back in March of this year. Instead of including the information in the weekly district update 1 week before the board vote, we would have made it a point to share the options immediately after holistic and closed session on March 7th. So on the 8th, that's what we should have done. Individually noting this in a separate email with the options on March 8th, 2 weeks before the board vote, instead of on the 14th in the district update. You hear that occasionally. Well, do people really read the district update? Something this important, that's what we should have done. And that's why I wanted to state this tonight, because then it will go into the evaluation and summary, which in turn goes into my evaluation. Talking with Mark Goings, Dan Wilson, other members of district leadership from the teacher perspective and other individuals in holistic, we'd taken that feedback from them after the fact to improve that communication flow with the holistic committee itself to all staff. And we identified key individuals in the retirement group, even though the retirement group is not in this area. We also, it's not noted in the indicator, sharing types of information about future rates and such for insurance directly to spread pertinent information to retirees in the future. Furthermore, district is in compliance with exception on 611 due to our continued system work that Kay would possibly illustrate. I would like the board to ask her, not to put her on the spot, but the stay interview, something was very interesting to me when she shared that with me a couple months back, that will help provide context and development for our steps to measure improved morale, climate, and culture. And then with all remaining OE 612 through 615, it's kind of like last year. I'm in full compliance with those. I'm not changing, by myself, changes to the employee handbook without board approval. I'm not changing my compensation. I'm not changing employee compensation plans and benefits. And the last one is promising people positions in this organization because I like them or I know them or, those types of things. So 12 through 15, very, very quick with the compliance on that. So thank you for your time. Hopefully you didn't mind me kind of going through it in that fashion. Kay and her department, quite a bit of work with that. Also Kim, Mandy, a little bit from teaching and learning, from administration, especially when it comes to the professional development pieces with not just PD, but DPI and health requirements for specific trainings. So anyway.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. I'm sorry for my muttering here. I was making sure that Dr. Farrar was ready for note taking. Appreciate that. Before I open it up to everyone else, I'll just take the opportunity to say I appreciate the focus on changes in compliance from last year to this year. That helps me to more effectively monitor the progress that we're making, even in areas where we're not up to that full compliance. Knowing that we're making progress and being able to more easily bring that out was helpful for me as I read this. At this time, I'll open it up to comments and questions from board members. Dr. Johnson.
So just one point of clarification. So we, by approving this report, we also approve the additions and eliminations. Is that kind of how?
I think that's been how we're doing it. So, and that's where we can use an amendment process if we want to, hold out those changes to consider later, or to just say we don't, agree with them. So that, yes, that's kind of how we've taken it in this cycle.
So if that's the case, then I asked that on page 16 because it was done earlier with another indicator that was scratched out, that indicator 2, indicator 3 be changed to 2 now, since indicator 2 under OE 611 is crossed out, but it still has indicated. So I request that indicator 3 be turned to indicator 2. If you go back up to where you all did it, also if you go back to on page 8, when you eliminated the indicator 2 there, because it was incorporated somewhere, you changed that indicator 3 to a 2. I asked that same change be made on page 18 as well, since you embedded the.
So page 15, 8, and.
So if you just, OE, so 16, page 16.
Dr. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if it's okay, I think because that's essentially just like effectively what I would call a typo, okay. I think we can probably just approve that change by unanimous consent if there's no objection to the board. to that one. And then I'll turn the floor back over to you because I'm not sure that you were.
No, it's good. I just need a point of clarification.
Yes.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
So I think, Terry, just go ahead and, that's, and if there's anything ever, like changes that the administration is proposing within that to languages or indicators or interpretations, that is, and I'll get to you just a second, Commissioners, that is something that's appropriate once we have the motion to approve it and to, motion to amend it. But this is typographical more than anything. So Commissioners are.
Thank you. So I tried to make very detailed notes because I was a bit of a rambling mess last week when it came to monitoring. Apologies, everyone. So 6.1 indicator 3, I'm very, very, very happy to see the stay interview. Former Commissioner Christina Boyle called me maybe a year ago and asked me why we weren't talking about that because the work had been done at some point. You know how she is. And so this is something that I'm really happy that I can go back to her and be like, it's happening, it's happening. So I'm just very, very happy. Also, I want to say, so I just feel like this is a strength. I also like the narrative component there and just how it's structured in 6.1. That was really lovely for me to read. 6.2, and I don't know if it's under 6.2 or 6.9. This might be an omission for me. I think I'd like to see maybe articulated in the future, and it's not immediate. It's not anything that I feel like is urgent, but definitely curious about efforts that we have internally to grow our own, whether that's from our student body, like what are we doing with our high school kids who are excited to become educators? What are we doing with our paras and our support professionals, BEAs? How are we leveraging their enthusiasm to be in our schools for abysmal wages to get them they're dedicated to being with kids, and how can we grow them into, we have a lot of diversity in our population there, even though I'm really glad to see the strength in, I think it was 6.14, maybe, I don't remember where that was, 6.2 something, where we had, indicator 4, 6.24. That's a really nice strength there for us. Another 6.9, again, articulated in the future, maybe it's an omission. I think I'd like us to monitor what our process or system is, or maybe we can speak to it, I don't know, but opportunities for staff to request PD. I think sometimes we don't know. I mean, there's we can determine that, downtown here, what is good for teachers to hear, but sometimes we don't know what they might be struggling with or what they might be feeling like, I don't have the expertise in this, and I would really like to get the expertise in this in order. And obviously sub shortages are what they are. It's a challenging time in education that way. But how do we support our staff who are passionate and curious and want to go out and expand their knowledge to benefit kids? I really appreciated in here the narrative components. Superintendent Johnson, I really appreciated what it provides to the board. 6.11 indicator 3. Now I say that and I don't know. Let me find it. I have it written down. This is the stay interview. Yeah, I just appreciated that. And 6.11, I just want to comment on the narrative there. I think this is what we need to see with, I think perhaps I was critical of a compliance last week, and Director Van Vliet brought up, what is compliant and what how do we define that? And I think how that is stated in 6.1.1, where it's, hey, this is why we're not meeting it, and here are the steps we're going to take one by one to go, to bring ourselves into compliance. To have that written down, that is just perfect. I love it. Strength.
A lot better idea than I had. That's the team back there.
Good job, guys.
You want to hear my number 6, so.
And I am just grateful for the acknowledgement of the holistic committee and I think we maybe had some missteps in communication in the spring when it came to benefit rollout. In particularly, what the timeliness was of notification. And I want to make sure that gets stronger. And I want to make, I think that the addition of timely is welcome from my perspective.
Commissioner Clements.
Thank you. For OE 6.3 indicator, I'm gonna make sure I'm on the right page here. I'm sorry. Or 6.2 indicator 3 at the bottom of page 5, or indicator 4 at the bottom of page 5. So the indicator includes that candidate and staff diversity will increase each year to more closely reflect the student population. So that second part, not just increase, but to more closely reflect the student population. We have information on applicants and total employees, which I think is good. But it doesn't show the second half, like how does that relate to our student population? As commentary would be also good to know instructional versus non-instructional staff in terms of, if we're making progress in one area but not another, or where relative. I think that would be something I would like to see to make sure that we're seeing, because it says we're in compliance in terms of increasing, but I'm not sure we're in compliance, because I don't know. You have this in other documents, which I could have done my homework and found, but it'd be good to see that under that indicator, here's the target.
That could be easily included, because I think part of that was, I think it was our equity annual report, where we have it actually, I think, in a bit more detail, but we could certainly add it to indicator 4. Thank you. Thanks. Yes, the last thing, if there's adequate wait time here, when Kay and I talked about this, I think we struggled a little bit last year with how we reported certain pieces of the indicators in our progress. And maybe this goes back to agenda setting when we talk about doing this and sharing this. Actually, all OEs and all Rs, it just felt a little bit like we had the data completed. And if we did it earlier in the fall, maybe, as opposed to the first week of December, if there was a way to, because at the end of the school year, we go school year on some of the data. I think we struggled with it last year, but this year we just determined, well, we're just going to report it for 21-22 for the full school year. Was that piece about having everybody do the mandatory training by October 31st. And we went from 84%, we went to 94%. And it's really, really difficult with some of our hourly folks to get them the necessary trainings. We just felt that if we were able to do that, able to do this report, maybe October, September, we really wouldn't have to worry as much. But that's just a thought for the future.
Well, we need to, I think, keep let's put that in an item. I have a couple of things that I've been thinking about for our work calendar, and obviously we want to monitor at a schedule that works well for when the data is available and we can be the most up to date. So that, and then as we come here into the spring and we're looking at next year's calendar, I think that we can easily just have that conversation about what can we juggle around and where to make our monitoring the most impactful. Perhaps that, I don't think that solves like what Dr. Johnson's talking about our ability to be active in the thing, but if we're monitoring it at the correct points, then that might help some of that, But yeah, so let's make a note of that. Let's make sure that we, like I said, I've got a few things that I've been thinking of to make sure we stay off of holidays or open up some space for board work in the January or something like that. So that's great. We can definitely address that, and I can't imagine we'd have too much problem with juggling around our monitoring schedule. There are no other requests for the floor at this time. I would hear a motion to approve the OE6 monitoring report. Commissioner Clements.
Before we motion, can we hear the comments that were collected?
Sure.
Yeah, so in strengths, the narrative components There are some specific points in terms of 6.2.4, opportunities for staff to request PD, and 6.1.1, narrative on what compliance and non-compliance is. And then omissions about staff diversity to closely reflect student body, share more on student data for target. Anything else that I missed?
Could you move the efforts to, I don't know if you have that in
paraprofit.
Yeah, the grow your own initiatives like that, basically transitioning those folks into licensed educators, like, you know, what that looks like. Could you move that into omission?
Yeah.
Also the, what did you say?
Opportunities for the staff.
Yeah, staff PD is also omission.
Okay.
Mhm. And then I guess another strength would actually be just the narrative on 6.1.1 for non-compliance, just the form of it for me. And the strength is the stay interview, for sure.
The what
The
interview?
stay interview.
Yeah.
Then I'd make a motion as modified.
So to approve OE6, the summary statement sheet is separate from that anyway. So we have a motion to approve OE6. Is there a second?
Second.
Sorry. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The monitoring report is approved. We'll now move on to a short board development session. That is our annual presentation of recommendations for 5-year capital projects. We'll turn it over to Abby Johnson and Jeff Nestor. We'll have some time if there are board comments or questions.
So tonight, Board President Nordine said we're here to present the 23-24 capital improvement plan. You're going to see that there are some additional things outside of our $1.8 million budget, and Jeff Nestor's here with me, our general manager of facilities, to kind of walk through that and explain it. So go.
Well, good evening, everybody. Before we get started, I'd just like to make sure that I note that you'll see some stars and a star next to some of our project costs. Those would indicate items that were indicated or found in our facility study that we did earlier this year. So a single star means that it's a high priority item, and 2 stars means it's a medium priority item. So I'd like to begin with the exterior portion of our capital improvement stuff that we'd like to do. So we'd like to, at North Star, we want to resurface the tennis courts for $57,000 due to the wear that they've received in the last couple of years. We also want to replace some exterior doors for $85,000 at Montessori and some at Manz for $65,000. Those doors have been around since they built the buildings. They've shown a lot of wear. Their functionality is in question. They're starting to rust. And on top of it all off, they're not really energy efficient. So we'd like to make sure that we replace those doors. We'll move off to the interior portion of our building. So Sherman Elementary, we like to replace the gym floor. It's original to the building. It's actually a vinyl. So we want to replace that with a wood floor for $160,000 to meet the needs of our students and also for the general public so that they'll be able to use that for after school activities. We need to replace the DeLong stage rigging for $92,000. That was found in our facility study also, but we do rigging inspections every single year. And a rigging inspection indicated that it was time, due to the excess wear and the age of the equipment, that it needs to be replaced sooner than later. You'll see the Memorial Gym lockers for replacement for $190,000. That's just due to the condition that they're in. They definitely need to be replaced. You'll see the highlighted item there, Memorial Orchestra lockers for $75,000. So Before, orchestra lockers and band lockers would be part of a building budget because it's directly associated with that. But due to the cost, as Abby and I were discussing, due to the cost and the nature of the scope of work that needs to be completed, we decided to move it into a capital budget. So for that particular thing, currently Memorial Orchestra students store their instruments in regular lockers right outside the door of the orchestra room. So we'd like to give them the proper type of storage for their instruments. They're very expensive. They deserve to be taken care of. We also need to replace the Sam Davey gym floor due to its age. I believe that's also original. It's a rubberized floor. It's worn out. It's time to get it replaced for $87,000. So interior use that we're going to be doing is $604,000. Now we move on to the plumbing and HVAC and electrical. So we need to replace the fire alarm over at Flint Elementary for $234,000 just due to its age. It's antiquated. It doesn't meet current requirements for fire alarms. If we have issues with it and we need to replace some equipment on it, you can't find that. It's not readily available to find that equipment to replace. But more importantly, we need to get it to the standard that is required by the state and also by the district. We have to replace the rooftop unit here for $224,000 at the board office here. That was indicated as a high item to be replaced, or a high importance item to be replaced in our facility study. The North Star generator for $150,000. That's original to the building. So it's an ongoing maintenance issue with that that's came to light in the last 3 to 4 months. It's continual, its reliability is not where we want it to be. And we also want to upgrade that a little bit to add more capacity onto it so we can add more items onto our school building for that. Now you'll see the next 3 things: the North Star boiler replacement for $500,000, the North Star chiller replacement for $290,000, and the Longfellow chiller replacement for $256,000. You'll notice there's a caret next to it, as well as two stars. That denotes that the DPI has approved us to use ESSER funds to be able to complete those projects. It's important that that's aged equipment. To replace it, we can get more reliability. We'll also be able to create a better environment for our students and our staff and the general public. But it also will help us reach our goal, work towards lowering our energy outputs or inputs. The total of those would be $1.6 million. That's okay, go ahead, it's fine. So in 2016, we did a referendum, and we have some interest that's left over that we'd like to use to replace the Sam Davey roof. It's the high roof, the old part of the building. At that time, before we used some of this referendum money during that time to replace the roof over there at Sam Davey, this is a different part. It doesn't meet our standards as far as insulation goes, energy efficiency. Also, it's a maintenance problem. It leaks every year, every spring, we have to patch it. And also it's out of warranty. So we'll probably bring it back into warranty. So to summarize, we have $207,000 that we want to use for exterior facility improvements, $604,000 for interior facility improvements, plumbing, HV, and electrical, $608,000. We have architectural fees of $127,000 to $128,000, construction management $70,000 to $71,000, health and safety and asbestos management of $30,000, a contingency of $152,000. That brings us to our normal operating budget of $1.8 million. On top of that, we want to use the referendum interest to replace that roof over at Sam Davey for another $260,000. And we're going to use the ESSER funds for capital improvements, the boiler, the chillers at Longfellow and at North Star of $1.1 million. So next year, we're looking to use $3.2 million towards capital improvements.
So thank you, Jeff. As I'm sure the board noticed as they did their prep, there's no board action that's needed at this time. This is just an informational item for us, but we'll open it up right now for any questions or discussion from members. Commissioner Clements, and then we'll go to Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. So you mentioned a few times in passing, especially with like the chillers, the high energy utilization equipment. How are you incorporating our climate commitment in terms of these, these high impact pieces of equipment that are going to last a generation or so?
So the idea behind it is using our ESSER funds, available funds, to be able to do this, to take something, a boiler that's say 65 or 70% efficient, and make it into a 96% efficient boiler, thereby lowering our input from our use of fossil fuels, such as natural gas and those type of things. Also, our chillers, they're old too. There's a lot of maintenance goes along with them. Also, they're not energy efficient. No cooling system is ever going to be totally energy efficient, but the newer ones are definitely more energy efficient. It'll help us get towards those goals. It won't help us finalize those goals, but it'll help us work towards those goals. That's why we want to replace that equipment, along with other things that we have done with ESSER funds, like control work and those kind of things, to be able to allow us to have better control over and understand better where our peak energy uses are and how to curtail those.
So a lot of different kinds of material there. You're talking about vinyl flooring and lockers, which I assume are like coated steel or something. What kind of waste diversion or recycling?
All those, if it's steel, all that's going to be recycled, every bit of it. Whatever we can recycle, we will recycle. So we'll probably, especially the lockers, we'll take those ourselves to the recycling center. And then we get, and I'm sure you've seen it, where we'll get dollars for those to put it back there, and then they'll recycle those items for us. And we do that with all sorts of other different types of equipment. We start working with the HVAC equipment. So we have a recycler coming in that's removing the boilers. So there's parts of those boilers that can be recycled. There's stainless steel, there's cast iron. All of those items are required to be recycled. And some of that stuff, there's some other items in there that have to be disposed of properly. So we'll make sure and verify that that's done correctly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, so just, my somewhat non-serious question all the time. Would you know offhand, so how many parts is Sam Davies' roof right now? So I just, because that whole thing, it still doesn't understand how you warranty like different parts of roof, but I think Abby said that that's kind of how you make sure that you can always, but I'm just curious, like by doing that, like, well, is it one or is that like a third of the roof, or kind of where are we on the same, like?
We're going to talk specifically about Sam Davies. So Sam Davies, half. It's the other half of it.
Okay.
So currently that's been out of warranty for, I would say, 5 to 6 years, right? So it's lasted above the warranty period, but it's reached a point to where it's degraded enough that we have to do it.
So it's half.
It's half.
Oh, yeah, actually, that's really good. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Lyons.
Yeah, I look at the fire alarms and the boilers and the chillers, and what it makes me wonder is if you have a replacement cycle for all the buildings on these, go ahead.
So what we do is we obviously have a 5-year capital budget, right? Before I got there, and currently I've carried it on, where we determine that a fire alarm, we're working through these fire alarms as we go. Let's just take that as an example. A fire alarm basically, after 15 years, becomes an antiquated system. So if we replace all the fire alarms in one single year, we would incur that cost 15 years from now, most likely. So we like to try to do those year by year. As of next year, we'll be down to this building right here for a fire alarm expense. It goes to the same thing with the boilers and all components that we have, gym floors. I've even moved it off into like tennis courts. You see the tennis courts. So tennis courts in this part of the United States last. If we get 10 years out of it, we're very happy. We have to have a maintenance program to be able to do it. But every 10 years, We want to make sure that we have maybe not one every year, but we want to do it like one every other year. Same thing with the gym floor. So we're replacing some of these rubberized gym floors with wood gym floors, right? So it's a renewable resource, but a wood gym floor will last 100, 150 years. All we have to do is maintain it, sand it, and reline it. We do incur those costs, but it's far less than trying to replace it every 15 years.
Thanks.
Seeing no other questions, thank you, Jeff, for the update. Abby, I imagine you're going to be staying right here. We have two more items on tonight's agenda prior to our debrief. Those are both items that are reserved for board action. We spoke about this at our last meeting in a presentation and had a consensus agreement to bring them forward if they were ready, which they are for tonight. We'll start with item 11.1, the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of 98,600,000 bond anticipation notes pursuant to section 67.121B of the Wisconsin statutes. Abby, take it away. And then, at some point we'll have a board motion and a vote on this.
Sure. There's not a lot to take away. The resolution was put into board docs last week, updated today. Basically, the bond anticipation notes have been sold pending board approval tonight. They went to the trading desk this morning, and so the details were enclosed in there. Basically, with board approval tonight, that authorizes the sale, and the district would receive the funds December 21st. And then those funds would be invested kind of like we talked about last week to start generating some interest income as we start finalizing and doing the architectural drawings for the projects and things like that. So tonight, really what we're asking for is board approval on the sale that happened this morning to kind of, again, move that process forward.
So because we did have discussion about it last week, I'd like to start with a motion, and then that doesn't preclude any comments or questions, but we can talk about it within the bounds of a motion. So I would hear a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Clements, sure.
So you mentioned sale of the bonds. We'll receive them in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And then they accrue interest income, which I assume is a lesser rate than the bond. So why do we bond at this moment when we're sure that we have the referendum passed? So that wasn't in question. So why do we hold the note for months or longer until there's actual need to draw on it?
Sure. I have Baird on with us. And so I'm going to let them answer it because they'll articulate it much better than I will. I understand it, but they'll articulate it better. So do you see Debbie Burnett on or Mike Clark?
The additional, there's 3 people, but I can't see them.
Connor, can you tell, do we have Debbie or Mike on?
Mike is on and I just enabled this mic.
Okay, perfect. Mike, did you happen to hear the question?
I did. Okay, good. So good evening. Yeah, there's a couple reasons we're bringing the bonds at this point. One which was already identified is the district would be able to put these dollars to work in terms of being invested, and the additional dollars that will be yielded by that are available for one of two purposes: additional projects, which I know that was something that the board had kind of debated going into the referendum, or to pay down debt service. The other reason why we're doing it now, there's a IRS regulation. It's called replacement of funds, and even though it's kind of convoluted when you look at Wisconsin law and how the finances are handled, the district did levy additional funds as part of the 2022-23 Fund 39 levy, and the debt needs to be in place before the district receives those funds. If it receives the funds prior to the issuance of the debt, it's considered a replacement of funds. Again, even though they're separate pots in Wisconsin, it's one of those federal laws that doesn't necessarily translate well to the state level. So when we issue the long-term debt, we will be using those dollars the district levied in the fall, and we'll be collecting in January to pay down the bond anticipation note. The bond anticipation note is similar to a construction loan. So when it comes time to issue the actual bonds, the bond amount will be less than the 98.6 referendum amount, because we'll pay down some of that right away and save interest costs in doing so.
Okay, I got it. Not sure if that was, I understood all the intricacies of it, but thank you.
So the part that he's talking about that we levied this fall was the 4 million to keep our tax levy at the 60 million, if that helps. I don't know if you put those two together.
Other discussion? Seeing none, we can call the question. Terry, when you're ready, please take a roll call vote. Again, to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of $98,600,000 bond appreciation notes pursuant to section 67.121B Wisconsin statutes. This is item 11.1.
Commissioner Bika? Commissioner Clements?
Yes.
Commissioner Farrar?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lyons?
Yes.
Commissioner Nordin?
Yes.
Commissioner Zur?
Yes.
The resolution is approved. We'll now move on to 11.2, resolution authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $98,600,000 general obligation refunding bonds. Abby, if you would just give us that brief summary again.
Sure. So piggybacking on what Mike just said, we levied the $4 million additional with our 22-23 budget. And so we'll use that 4 million to reduce the amount that we will issue. So we have up to 98.6, but it's likely we will issue less bonds than that because we'll, pay off some of that debt ahead of time. And basically what that does is that locks in our long-term rate and will give us our payments for the next 20 years. And so we talked a little bit about this last week at the referendum committee. We talked about our amount being about 40 cents per $1,000 of equalized property value. We are anticipating that's going to be about 35 cents based upon what we're seeing now. But the short term gives us the debt, or gives us the ability to use that 4,000 to prepay the long-term notes. And then this parameters resolution, which is what you're asked to be approving tonight, gives us some flexibility, the flexibility to Mike or myself, as well as Dr. Nordin, to lock in those bonds at the best time possible to get the best rate. So that way, because that's going to impact the interest that we pay. And so by approving the parameters resolution, that gives us the flexibility based upon Baird's recommendation to say, hey, we think this is a good week or a good day to lock in what those rates, and then it will come to the board for final approval after that. So this resolution really just gives the authority to Mike or myself and Dr. Nordin to commit on behalf of district administration and the school board for that future debt that we know that will be issued, probably sometime between the end of January and I think June 21st is what the date is that it looks like.
So again, because we had the outline of this last time, and I know referendum committee made those recommendations to put Abby, your Superintendent Johnson, and myself in the signees or the designees. I'd like to start with a motion to approve, and then we can go into any discussion that's necessary.
So moved.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, this is the motion to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $98,600,000 general obligation refunding bonds. Terry, when you're ready, if you please conduct a roll call vote.
Commissioner Bika?
Yes.
Commissioner Clements?
Yes.
Commissioner Farrar?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lyons?
Yes.
Commissioner Nordin?
Yes.
Commissioner Zerr?
Yes.
The resolution is approved. Thank you, Abby. And forward to that call to sign sometime in the spring at a low interest rate. That concludes the body of our meeting for the evening. The only thing left tonight prior to adjournment is our regular board debrief. I will turn it over to Dr. Farrar to facilitate our assessment of our performance.
Let's just go down the road. Commissioner Zerr.
Yeah, I guess strengths tonight. I think we all were able to at least talk about our governance policies in a proactive way. And I think what I was impressed with was our commitment to having, I think maybe it was Commissioner Lyons who called it a tool that we use to govern. And, I think that sometimes, you need to go to the store and get a new tool, or, like get a new thing to put on your tool to make it work better. And I think not only do we need it to work better for us, but we were able to talk about how we might need it to work better to benefit, the people who have to execute those policies. And I think that was a real strength. I still struggled, and I hope that we have an opportunity to put concrete depth behind what we talked about tonight. I hope that is something that we get to on a future agenda or something. That's saying something about an agenda item. But it's fine to talk about it, but I think we need to actually just start hashing out, do we have to have our own grievance process? Like, as a board, like, do we need to have a process that is articulated in our policy by which we do that? And I want to see what that, maybe multiple options of what that looks like, or nothing at all. But I think I want to make sure that that's something we articulate clearly in the future for ourselves as in consideration.
I yield.
Commissioner Johnson, you said something that's just really stuck in my mind because it summarized exactly how I felt last week, and that was frozen in my ability. I didn't know, there were things that I wanted to somehow have an impact as a board member, and I did feel that exact way, frozen in my ability. So as we do start to massage the coherent governance processes, I really would like to focus on that as well, because I didn't know what to do. And it is, kind of a disarming feeling when you feel like you want to make an impact on something, you just don't know how to navigate the systems. So that's on the negative. On the positive side, I do feel like the process at the end of the day, I think it worked. I commend Superintendent Johnson for stepping back, considering, and changing direction. And I think that was because of the community and the board and a lot of things, looking at it from a different perspective. So,
I spent a lot of time over the last week thinking about board performance and how we as a board, through our governance culture policies, have committed to operating within this system. And, looking back, I think, and I also received some feedback from some people outside critiquing or giving some input as to how our board is being perceived. I think that's something that I talked briefly with Dr. Bika about it, and we said it would be something good to talk more about at our upcoming excuse me, board annual self-evaluation. I need to look in January or February, but we'll get to it. And I think that looking at my own performance, both as the board president, but also as an individual board member. And I think Commissioner Zur reminded me last week that there's kind of two parts to me as that role. I know that I don't feel that I hit everything that I needed to, especially at the last meeting. I don't know that I don't know if we as a board, in our first opportunity to have this sort of extraordinary situation, hit a home run. And I think that is something that we need to continue to work on. And that means, I think one thing that made me realize is that we need to get some more board development, in your governance, hit some more seminars, Commissioner Lyons, you referred to not being certain what to do. And I think part of that is that we need continued training to know what our options are. And so that we don't feel frozen, and some of that may come through adjustment of our own to make it work for us. But I think, the process is there. And I think we just, as a board, we could use some more of that in our own development. And for me personally, to continue to learn about it. In terms of strength tonight, I appreciate the discussion that we were able to have and the way that we were able to hopefully focus it on those two aspects of our governance, which are policy based, and how do we support the administration in going forward? Because I think we all want to be moving forward. We all want to, and I think all of us take very seriously the commitments that we've made in our equity statement, throughout our policies. I think we got a better handle on that tonight, both in trying to find ways to support the administration through our policies and to make our expectations clear, but also to start the process of looking at our own governance and how can we do a better job. I was impressed by all of you.
I appreciated the ideas that Commissioner Zur and Commissioner Johnson brought forward in relation to one, agenda setting and ensuring that we have a clear process for getting urgent matters onto an agenda, and making sure that our existing policies do not obstruct our ability to get urgent matters onto an agenda expeditiously.
Excuse me.
Similarly, Dr. Johnson pointed out that we need to have tools to be responsive to urgent matters, and that might include but go beyond agenda setting in terms of what action the board is able to take. So I really appreciate those ideas. I know that all of us are thinking hard about how we can make this system work to create the results that our students need. So I appreciated learning from others tonight and hearing those ideas. I'm also very grateful to Superintendent Johnson and the administration for changing this direction and listening to community members and the board.
One thing with this thing you were talking about for the future, like defining reasonable evolution, how we propose agenda items, how we be more responsive to issues. The thing I was hoping to add to that is, and credit to Director Van Vliet, is the operational definitions for compliant with exception, and compliant. I think that the leadership team in the district probably has operationally defined and has a good understanding. I don't know that we all do, or that the board, between board and administration. So I think that that's our board development. I've thought a lot about what my experiences were like on the school board before coherent governance, and then during, especially after. And I think I want to be thinking about, as far as being responsive to issues, if that structure is actually already in place. And I think about what we did tonight with OE6 and personnel administration, because we had the foundation. That was the first time through. So now we're in the second round of it. And I'm really thinking about how all that we need is possibly already here in the process. And a couple of examples. So Erica, you talked about the stay interview. And I really feel like never before, that is such a, it's such a very specific like item. Before coherent governance, I don't think we would have never had exposure to that level of detail. And so it creates this opportunity that there's so much information that the board now has access to. And it's happening in a very systematic way that it's an opportunity, I think, and I believe that we showed a system that's working in change that happened in the last week. And again, to credit to Superintendent Johnson and the whole leadership team, I can't think that I can't remember a time where an action was taken so nimbly, so swiftly. I really can't. And so I think of another example on world languages. This is my last point. Was my check. I said last week that I felt stuck in coherent governance. And in hindsight, I wish I had used other wording. I was only stuck because it's new. I wasn't stuck, I don't think, because of a flaw in the system, just because of my unfamiliarity with the system. So with world languages, that R2, I think, created the opportunity. You know, I was a new board member when Hmong culture and Hmong languages were getting started, and I could have noticed, where is that? You know, where is that innovative signature program in R2? You know, and that was the end. That was the opportunity to ask about it. If some action needed to be taken, it's not about being having a crystal ball, but it's about our ability to see what's there and what's not there in these policies. And that's when we act on it. So I was going to say, I would like to spend time thinking about what we already have available to us before we move toward what's the next new thing or the hybrid thing. Just really look at what we have.
Well, I think as a second of back-to-back meetings where we're processing a heavy thing going on that it's not entirely clear what we could do about it. I think it was pretty clear from the beginning that there was little, if any, separation between us in terms of our feelings about it. I think but there led to some, I think, talking past each other on what we should do about it. Again, I don't know that we have consensus exactly as to what that is, but I think it's clear that we need to figure out how to reinforce not only our own board procedures, but how do we relate to each other through them. That again, I don't think there didn't seem to be any disagreement about what the intention of the board was. And I think there's a lot of disappointment about how we felt like it failed. But I think we've muddled through it. We're not done, but I think that we had a chance to air our concerns or grievances with our process, and hopefully that can lead to a stronger one. So that when we tackle the next issue that causes similar response, that we're able to do so in a I guess less tense way. I would say that this is perhaps the way that I was digesting it this was not the first time. This is just the first time we disagreed with it. So, going through COVID lockdowns, masking, banning books, gender policies, like the only reason that this was different is because we disagreed with the administration this time. Like any one of those other decisions could have been that same situation. We just happened to generally agree with that the administration's controversial interpretations were correct. Even if we were not exactly comfortable with what that meant, but any of those times we could have found ourselves in a similar situation, and we decided not to intervene. And sometimes those were conscious decisions not to intervene. So I think that the process is a good one, but not a perfect one. We need to work towards making it more so, just as we're trying to steer our district in that kind of similar vein. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Furrow. Thank you, everyone. At this time, I would hear a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. All right, we're adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the Eau Claire Area School Board.